point that Fred just brought up. I think one of the real important, significant reasons why the civil rights revolution really succeeded in terms of legislation, the sweeping Civil Rights Act of 1964, for example, is the economy. We had a booming economy at that time. We had a 2% unemployment rate. And a 2% unemployment rate in a country as large and dynamic as ours is nothing. 2% of the workforce is always going to be out of work. They're busy changing jobs or taking a rest. So in effect, you almost had really, from a real point of view, zero unemployment rate. There were plenty of jobs. If, on the other hand, we were back in the days, if back in those days we had this kind of economy, with the shortage of jobs, where you have college graduates, people with graduate degrees, fighting for a $10 an hour job, outcome may have been very, very different. So the timing of the civil rights movement was very, very fortunate. And the fact that Lyndon Baines Johnson was the president was also very, very fortunate in terms of having a successful political outcome.
By the way, just a little aside here, the previous commenter was Del Sweeney, one of our panelists from last year, one of the two Freedom Riders, and we taped that panel, and there are segments on YouTube that you can watch of her testimony, of Eileen's testimony about the Freedom Rides and their participation in it, and also the local situation, integrating restaurants and amusement parks and so forth in Baltimore. One of our members put those on YouTube, so I'm a technical dinosaur, so I'm going to ask Daniel Gombeck to tell us how you can find those on YouTube.
You go to our website and they're there.
Okay, so our website is listed on the business card that's at the front table there. Go to there and you can find the YouTubes. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Yes, Tom.
The recent importing of a gigantic crane into the port of Baltimore, first of all, why wasn't the crane manufactured in the U.S.? Why did we import a crane which only reverses our economy? The crane now facilitates the importing and unloading of ships.
Okay, so that's a very good question. I've heard this question posed before. It's off our topic. If either of our panelists would like to answer that, they can. But no, Fred passes, Larry passes, and I would suggest, I'm not going to field it. I'm not an economist. I agree with the criticism of that policy. Kind of crazy. I think the crane was from either Korea, South Korea, or China. I forget which. But anyway, if anyone would like to discuss that with Tom Schwartz in the red sweater there, feel free to do so after the break. Anybody else? Yes, gentleman in the back.
What does CORE stand for? C-O-R?
What does CORE stand for?
Yes.
Congress of Racial Equality.
Gotcha. Okay.
I could be, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I would say that was probably the biggest grassroots civil rights organization in the 60s, perhaps, other than the NAACP.
Okay.
And they had been around since I think the early 40s. Yeah. And they were founded on principles of nonviolence.
question.
Yes, lady in the front.
You mentioned four, so you're talking about the four groups that was here in Baltimore. And where else was it a national organization?
Yes, it was a national organization, Judy, and they had a big role that played, freedom rides, sit-ins, setting organizers down south. By the way, this has nothing to do, but while we're talking about organizers down south, this reminds me of a true story. There was a Jewish attorney in Baltimore in the 60s whose name was Marvin Brademan. And he went down to Mississippi to help in registering voters. And I don't know how many of you have ever been to Mississippi. I've had the pleasure, and it's a very, very rural state. And he's up going out in the rural areas, and he's coming back. All of a sudden, a car with 3 or 4 people in it forced him off the road, and they were Klansmen. And they take him in his briefcase, get him in their car, and one of them says, "Give me that briefcase." And Marvin says, "No, don't touch that briefcase." They say, "Give me that briefcase." No, don't touch that briefcase. One of the Klansmen that was there was really a man in his teens, his late teens or early 20s. And he said, "Don't touch the briefcase." He's not kidding. I saw a James Bond movie last night where the case exploded. That's a true story, Bob. At least according to Marvin.
Okay. Yes, gentleman over here.
Pretty much.
Go on.
I'd like to thank you, the panel, but especially you, for me personally, and hopefully for a lot of other people, for the effort you made at a very difficult time to help us, the country, to overcome some very, very big problems. There are some congressmen in some congressmen in Washington now who get quite a bit of blame for obstructing programs. If it hadn't been for you, they wouldn't now be able to obstruct the programs because the programs are so wonderful. And those of us who are African American, Negroes, colored, black folks, could not be where we are now, except that people like you took a stand and stood by. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you very much for those kind words. But I want to tell you something. It's a two-way street. As a result of my association with guys like John Burley, Walter Carter, and other men I met in Corps.
Those are my personal friends.
Okay.
I've been around for a long time. They are my personal friends. You mentioned Gerald Smith.
Right.
At one time, he was my brother-in-law. Oh. But he's been my buddy since high school. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was going to say, as a result of my association with those gentlemen, I became a better person. I became stronger, I became smarter, I became braver. And so really, it's a two-way street. I think I gained much more than I gave. Thank you for those questions.
You got as much as we got. You got a whole lot, buddy.
Well, one thing I forgot to mention at the very beginning, and this is gone into in detail in this article, in the book here. Larry didn't mention this. I think he's a little sensitive about it, but as a result of his activism while working at Social Security, his job functions there were, how can I put it, curtailed. He went from a position of being a heavy-duty policy guy to being the guy who handled employee suggestions in the suggestion box for 3 years. On the plus side, that led him into a career change, and that seemed to work out pretty well. David.
Okay, first, thank you very much, Mr. Ageloff, and Fred, excuse me, Professor Pincus, sorry. Just one quick comment, maybe one question. Your thing about that Bob read, and I'm, obviously a little before my time, but my understanding was that in the civil rights movement, the overwhelming majority of the quote-unquote Jewish American community was probably for the civil rights community, with maybe the exception of Southern Jewry or the Southern Jewish community. Maybe Mrs. Sweeney can comment on that. It's my understanding. So maybe you can comment on that. Now, being accused of foreign accent from New York, and I know hopefully the New York, can you, if I can ask, so be presumptuous, how has your Jewish background or whatever influenced you? Because I know, like with my dad, a lot of my relatives were killed by Hitler, and a lot of Jews felt like, well, that happens with that, especially if people know Hitler took a lot of Nuremberg laws and Jim Crow. So, that's how it kind of influenced that one to come along.
David, I don't want you to think you have an accent. You don't have an accent. Everybody else that has an accent. I really don't want to comment on the Holocaust and Jewish victims. I think, and the reason why I don't want to comment on it is, it is such a overwhelming, not only a national, international disgrace, how 6 million Jews died and why they died. And all the gypsies that died, the Poles that died, and this and that, and you go on with the list of victims forever. It doesn't do much good. The only good it does, and that's why I think it is important to remember that, is that you would hope that will never happen again. And the reason why you hope it will never happen again is that you hope people will rise up and say, you can't do this, and we're not going to allow you to do it. But other than that, I don't have anything to say.
I have a comment.
Let me just say a couple of brief things. In terms of the Jewish support for the civil rights movement, I haven't really come across studies of that. They probably were. And my guess is, in a general way, a lot more Jews and whites as well would say, yeah, I support equal rights. The problem often became when the issues came to you, if it was your neighborhood or your company or that kind of thing, and then things often became very dicey. And so there's a difference often between general support and kind of the specifics. I just want to mention one other thing also briefly. The idea of kind of appreciating how far we've come, I think is really important, and I know when I taught at UMBC, the students weren't always appreciative of that. I came to UMBC in 1968, and at the time, so that was the third year UMBC was in existence. At the time, there was no public bus that came to campus. And so, of course, and it took about 2 years to get that done. The university was kind of neutral at first, and then they saw that they needed more students, so they got behind it. But the location of UMBC and the lack of transportation, of course, really cut into the black population, which is very small.